Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for the Amazing Race 37 following episode 3, which was another decent episode. I felt like there were some interesting dynamics across the leg and some interesting moments here, but we'll get to that soon enough. But we have 11 teams to talk about, and as always, one more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 11, we have the latest boots from the season, and here we have Courtney and Jasmine. And I wasn't too surprised they ended up going home by the end of this episode, where they got a segment at the beginning of the episode talking about how they're nurses and that they're very adaptable, but they're not the fastest team in the world, which felt like foreshadowing for them having a lot of trouble on this leg. And we do see them getting lost over the course of the leg here, which was a running theme across the first couple episodes, with the show just consistently showing them getting lost. And while I wouldn't say that's what cost them the race here, it definitely caused them to end up in the back of the pack, to where they were second to last coming into the roadblock, and we really see them struggling on that roadblock with the soccer challenge, and that did cause them to fall all the way to last place. And from that point on, they were essentially dead to rights, where I felt like they didn't really have much of a shot of recovering beyond that. And again, I felt like they were a pretty fun team across these first couple episodes. Definitely not the most consistent team in the world, where they were in the middle of the pack for the first two legs, but obviously fell way behind in this final leg. And I thought they were fun characters, where we got fun moments of them getting lost and kind of bumbling around, but obviously they're not out of the race, to where they're here at number 11. And with that, we have 10 teams left in the race to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win the race, based on their edit and current game position. But at number 10, the team that I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is still Han and Holden. And to me, this was another mostly mediocre leg for them. Mind you, it was impressive how, despite them coming into the leg in last place and being one of the last teams to get to the roadblock, considering they were on the later train, they were able to make up some ground, to where they were able to come into the roadblock in last place, but get through it pretty effectively, to where they ended up in ninth place coming out of it, and they were able to hold that for the rest of the leg. So they did make a slight comeback here, which was somewhat impressive, but I still see them as one of the lesser teams from a race perspective. Though I think something else to mention is we actually got to see Phil telling them about the driver's seat, despite them being in ninth place and there having been other teams that finished ahead of them where we didn't see that. I feel like the fact that we saw Phil telling them about it makes me think that they're going to be involved in the driver's seat twist in some way, where either they are going to somehow make a miraculous comeback and end up in first and really dictate that twist, or they're going to be the team that's the most greatly harmed by this twist, where it's possible that the team that does get to decide how much work the other teams do ends up affecting Han and Holden, to where they struggle a lot and they could end up eliminated because of that. So I do find that aspect a bit interesting as well, but really the reason they're at the bottom is that I feel like I'm more confident in other teams from a race perspective, and I feel like they're not really being set up as underdogs in the way that other teams in the back of the pack currently are, to where they're here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and I actually considered having this team a little bit higher, though in the end I actually ended up dropping them. But number 9, we do have Bernie and Kerrigan. And Bernie and Kerrigan are another team that are towards the back of the pack. They really struggled a lot across his leg here, where they were 8th place coming into it. They were 9th place coming into the roadblock, and we see them really struggling with that, falling to second to last. And we also see them wasting a lot of time on the detour, where they were one of the teams to choose the star throwing detour and wasting a lot of time on that before eventually switching. And by the end, they end up in second to last, which is not particularly great there. They're in a pretty bad spot from a race perspective. Though at the same time, they also get some personal content in this episode, where we have them talking about growing up racially mixed and not really feeling like they belong in either group. And I did find that at least somewhat positive from an edit perspective. And I did consider having them a little bit higher. Though if I'm being honest, I feel like the team that was below them last week probably got more to do in this episode. And on top of that, they're in a better spot from a race perspective compared to Bernie and Kerrigan. So while I did consider bumping them up, I did decide at the end of the day to leave them behind here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have another team that I didn't really feel that great about coming into the season, and I still don't feel that good about them either, but I do feel like this was at least a better episode for them. And here we have Pops and Jeff. And really, I feel like this episode was good for them in a couple of regards, where for one, we do see them be able to catch the earlier train due to them being able to cut the line. They're able to make quite a bit of a comeback, where despite them coming to the leg in 7th place, they ended up in 5th place coming into the roadblock, and they eventually finished the leg in 6th place. So ended up being a decent leg for them from a race perspective. And on top of that, we also learned this episode that they're working with Melinda and Erica as being one of the only parent child teams in the race, and through that they're working together. So that's at least something to elevate them above Bernie and Kerrigan. But I just feel like I'm probably higher on other teams at this point. And I feel like the start to the season was pretty lackluster from an edit perspective. And while now we have a better sense of where they stand in the game and who knows where this alliance is going to go, I feel like for now, considering where we're at, I feel like number 8 is a good spot to have them. Now moving on to number 7, and we have a team who I just mentioned, and here we have Melinda and Erica. And I feel like they're in a similar boat to Pops and Jeff, where we learned this episode that they have an alliance together. Though I feel like Melinda and Erica get more of the focus for that, where I feel like we get more of their perspective on how like they are one of the only few teams in the race to have an older person within it. So due to that, I feel like I'm a bit higher on Melinda and Erica compared to Pops and Jeff. And on top of that, they're in a better race position right now where they came into the leg in 5th place and kind of hovered around the middle of the pack for a lot of it, though eventually are able to do well enough on the detour to finish in 4th place. I feel like they're in a better race spot right now compared to Pops and Jeff, which is another reason why I do have them above them here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have a team that made a bit of a comeback across this leg here compared to where they were at the beginning, though beyond that I was a bit underwhelmed by their edit. And number 6 we do have Brett and Mark, and Brett and Mark actually make a pretty strong comeback across a lot of the leg, where they obviously had a pretty bad leg 2 where they were in 9th place, and they were in the back of the pack during a lot of the early stages of it. In even coming out of the roadblock, they were in 8th place, though they really turned on during the detour where they were able to go from 8th place to 5th place. And obviously the fact that they were able to jump a couple of spots across the leg is all pretty impressive. Though despite that, they get no meaningful confessionals in this episode. I feel like we don't really learn more about them as people, or we don't really get much like meaningful content outside of them just narrating like their experiences during the actual tasks. I feel like for that reason, I can't really have them too much higher, even though this was technically a strong performance for them race-wise. But I feel like the other teams are more consistent or have better setup for a storyline moving forward, which is why I do have them here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and we have a team that's sort of the opposite of Brett and Mark in that while they didn't do that well in this like from a race perspective, I feel like they're being much more focused on as an underdog team. But number 5, we do have Nick and Mike. And the weird thing about Nick and Mike is that they are still in a pretty bad position gameplay-wise, where they came into this leg in 2nd to last in 10th place. And while they do make a slight comeback over the course of the race here, they also have a major setback during the detour where they waste a lot of time during the detour where they try to throw the stars, only for them to lose time there, and eventually made the switch over to the origami detour, where even though they were 7th place coming into the detour, they end up falling back to 8th place. So really, they only made a 2-spot improvement, and they still are, for the most part, in the back of the pack. Though I think what separates them from other teams that have been in the back of the pack is that I feel like they've gotten a very consistent focus on the show as this underdog team, where even this episode, they get a lot of personal content talking about how they have adopted meditating and how they use that to get through adversity, and a lot of that felt very unnecessary. We didn't really need to see that, but the fact that we got it really shows that we are meant to be rooting for Nick and Mike. They're meant to be these people to look out for. So I did consider that as a major element here. And obviously they do end up surviving. They do end up finishing in 8th place, which is technically an improvement over their ending in last week's race. So I do feel all right about Nick and Mike. And while they're not the most consistent team in the world, I feel like they're this team that we're meant to be looking for in the edit. And it's for the reason that I do have them here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and this team has gone down a little bit due to them having a mediocre leg here. And at number 4, we do have Alyssa and Josiah, who do have a downslide across this leg here where they came into it in 3rd place and they're able to hold on to 4th place during a lot of the leg here, only for them to, similar to Nick and Mike, waste a lot of time on the detour where they spend so much effort trying to get the star throwing challenge down and end up falling way behind because of that, and they end up finishing in 7th place despite them being in the top 3rd for a lot of it. So I do have to qualm with them for that. Even beyond that, I also found it funny how during the roadblock you had Josiah doing the roadblock there, even though Alyssa was talking in confessional about how soccer is part of her identity. So I did find that slightly amusing. So I did find their leg here to be pretty mediocre for the most part, and that is why I did slide them down a little bit. But even so, I still think they're a mostly consistent team. It wouldn't shock me if they end up making a comeback in the following leg, but considering they did technically have a setback across this leg, I did bump them down 1 spot to number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and we have a team that has been major focuses on the show, and also a team that did pretty well in this leg, and here we have Scott and Lori, who ended up winning this leg, which is all pretty good there. And I feel like my thoughts on them haven't really changed too much, where, again, I feel like they're a team that has gotten a lot of focus on the show, but I feel like on top of that, they are able to get into the front of the pack, where they started off in second place, and they're really able to hang in the top three during most of the race until we get to the roadblock, where they're able to pass into first place there. And even though they don't get the express pass, they are able to recognize that Carson and Jack and Jonathan and Anna were going for it, so they were able to save some time there, and they were first place going to the detour. They don't really lose any time there, and they end up winning the leg. So I feel like all that's pretty good. This is a pretty strong leg for them performance-wise, and I still feel like they're pretty major characters on this show. The question is, how consistent of racers are they at the end of the day? I think that'll be a big question mark for them. And on top of that, I feel like the top two teams that we'll be talking about are probably more consistent racers, at least based on what we've seen from them up to this point. So while I can't really have Scott and Lori at the top for now, it wouldn't shock me if they are able to remain in contention for more this season. But for now, I do have them here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and we have a team that also did pretty well across this leg. And here we have Jonathan and Anna. And Jonathan and Anna, they did technically slide back compared to last leg, though a lot of that's justified by them going for the express pass, where they did come into the leg in first place, and they're able to remain in the top 3 for pretty much the entire leg. Though they end up finishing the roadblock first, only for them to spend a little extra time going for the express pass, which they end up getting. That's all pretty good. And they do technically fall to third place, though it is pretty well justified. We even had them talking about how they like to have it for later, as they tend to struggle a lot in warmer climates. So I do feel like that's somewhat noteworthy there. And again, I feel like they're this team that we're meant to be looking out for as these strong racers, and a team that we would expect to do well moving forward. So that's a major reason why they are still relatively high on this list. Though I feel like the number 1 team is probably a little more consistent at this point, which is why I do have them here at number 2. And now at number 1, the team that I believe is the most likely to win the Amazing Race 37 at this point is still Carson and Jack. And for me, not much really changed for them across this leg, where they're still doing pretty well from a race perspective, where while they started the leg in 4th place and they were on the second train instead of the first, they were able to make up a lot of ground pretty quickly to where they were in the top 2 by the start of the roadblock. They're able to hold on to that for the rest of the leg here. Even though they do end up switching detours, they do waste a little time on the star throwing challenge before switching to the origami challenge, but they still are able to maintain their placement here. And they're also being presented as a pretty competent team, where while they wanted the express pass, they also recognized that they couldn't waste too much time on it, and they were pretty quick to drop the challenge at the point where Jonathan and Anna won it. And same thing with the star throwing task, where unlike the likes of Nick and Mike or Alyssa and Josiah, they don't waste too much time at the point where they realize that the star throwing challenge was harder than they expected. And I feel like they're the most consistent team so far from a race perspective, where again, their lowest placement so far is 4th place. And I feel like they're still a team that we're meant to be looking out for, a team that we're meant to be seen as serious contenders. And I feel like without much changing here, I did decide to leave them here at number 1. And there we go. That'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so you can look forward to that. I'm covering Survivor 48 and Australian Survivor, so if you want videos on those, be on the lookout for that. I'm on Patreon and have a YouTube membership, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that is the video. See ya.